Christmas Eve arrived quietly, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes every thought louder. By 6:30 p.m., my kitchen was alive with warmth. The oven hummed. The scent of roasted turkey, butter, and cinnamon wrapped itself around the room like a memory refusing to fade. The dining table stood ready for 9, polished plates, folded napkins, candles waiting to be lit. 2 small booster seats sat at the far end, placed carefully so my grandchildren could reach the table without help. I checked the clock. Still early. I wasn't pacing. I wasn't anxious. At 59, I'd learned the difference between loneliness and solitude. Since my wife passed 6 years ago, I'd built a life that worked. I taught cooking classes twice a week. I wrote a small but growing food blog. Tuesdays were for chess with friends, Thursdays for laughter and wine. I wasn't some forgotten old man clinging to scraps of attention. Tonight was just different. 2 weeks earlier, I'd invited my children, my 3 grown children, to Christmas dinner. Nothing fancy. Just family. Warren, my eldest, had replied with a vague "we'll see." Bryce sent a thumbs-up emoji. Blair didn't open the message for days. Still, I chose hope. I spent days preparing. Brining the turkey. Perfecting my late wife's cranberry recipe. Rolling pie dough until it was thin enough to let the light through. Every dish meant something. Every flavor carried history. At 7 p.m., Bing Crosby played softly from the radio. Outside, I watched my neighbor's kids laughing as they struggled to build a crooked snowman in the cold drizzle. I smiled. 7:15. I wiped my hands on my apron and checked my phone, expecting a "running late" text. Instead, I saw new messages in our family group chat. My heart lifted, then dropped. They weren't meant for me. Do we seriously have to go? He's exhausting. Nobody wants to spend Christmas with him. A laughing emoji followed. Then another. I stared at the screen, reading the words again and again, waiting for them to soften. They didn't. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have typed, "wrong chat. I can see this." But I didn't. I set the phone down slowly. Something inside me shifted, not loudly, not violently, but completely. This wasn't shock. This wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. I looked around the dining room. The untouched chairs. The candles. The small seats meant for children who wouldn't be coming. The song on the radio changed to "I'll Be Home for Christmas." I turned it off. Then I walked toward my desk, and opened my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't call them. Instead, I made a decision that would make Christmas morning unforgettable, for all of us. And what I did next, no one was prepared for. I sat at my desk for a long moment, the glow of the laptop screen reflecting back a face I barely recognized. Calm. Still. Too calm for a man who'd just learned his children found him unbearable. I thought about confronting them. Typing a single sentence into the group chat, "I saw everything." But I already knew how that would end: awkward apologies, excuses wrapped in guilt, promises that would quietly dissolve by next week. I was tired of apologies that changed nothing. What surprised me most wasn't the message itself. It was how familiar it felt. Like the final puzzle piece clicking into place. The disrespect hadn't started tonight, it had been growing for years, and I'd been too busy forgiving to notice. Warren had borrowed a large sum years ago for a "can't-fail" opportunity. It failed. The money never returned. After that, he only called when he needed childcare. I always said yes. Always. Bryce took money too, said it was for real estate. When it vanished, somehow that became my fault for not warning him enough. I apologized anyway. Blair hurt differently. She didn't need money. She needed distance. I'd learned, accidentally, that I no longer fit the image she wanted to present. A retired chef in an apron didn't match her curated online world. So I was quietly edited out. I'd told myself they were busy. Building lives. That I was being patient. But patience, I realized, had turned into permission. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped on a name I hadn't expected to call tonight, Jordan. A young guy I'd helped last year when he hit a rough patch. Tech-savvy. Kind. Reliable. He answered quickly. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Can you come over?" I said. "I need help with something. Tonight." 20 minutes later, he stood in my dining room, eyes flicking from the full table to my expression. I explained calmly. No drama. No raised voice. "I want to eat dinner," I said. "Exactly as planned. And I want it recorded." He hesitated. "Like, a video? A live one?" Silence. Then he nodded. We set up a simple camera. Nothing dramatic. No filters. Just the truth, 9 place settings, 1 person. The empty chairs spoke louder than I ever could. Jordan asked what title to use. I didn't think long. "Christmas Dinner Alone," I said. A father's story. When the red light blinked on, something strange happened. The anger drained away. I sat down, carved the turkey, and began to eat. And I talked, not accusing, not shouting, but telling the truth. About love given freely. About boundaries never set. About a man who cooked for 9 and showed up for 1. The viewer count started climbing. Hundreds. Thousands. By the time the pie was served, I wasn't alone anymore. I went to bed believing I'd simply shared a quiet moment. But while I slept, the internet made a decision of its own. And by morning, my children's lives would never be the same again. I woke up to my phone vibrating like it was possessed. At first, I thought something was wrong, an emergency, maybe. I reached for the phone, still half asleep, and squinted at the screen. Notifications stacked on top of each other faster than I could read them. Messages. Missed calls. Alerts from platforms I barely used. My live stream. It had exploded. By the time I sat up in bed, the video had crossed a number that didn't feel real. Millions of views. Millions. I refreshed the page, convinced it was a glitch, but the numbers kept climbing. I scrolled through the comments slowly, my chest tightening. "I'm calling my parents right now. This broke me. How could his children do this to him?" Some were angry. Some were heartbroken. Many were sharing their own stories, parents ignored, holidays spent alone, love taken for granted. I hadn't planned any of this. I'd only wanted someone to witness the truth. Instead, the world had decided to amplify it. Then the headlines appeared. Elderly father eats Christmas dinner alone. Children mock him, internet responds. A quiet Christmas that sparked outrage. My name was everywhere. And then I saw it. A screenshot. Our family group chat. The message I was never meant to read. The words, "Nobody wants to spend Christmas with him," frozen on thousands of screens, shared by people who didn't know my children, but now judged them anyway. I didn't post it. I never would have. But it didn't matter. The truth had escaped, and there was no pulling it back. I left the house that morning and met a few friends at our usual cafe. They didn't ask questions. They just showed up. Coffee was placed in front of me. A hand squeezed my shoulder. "You're not wrong for finally letting people see," one of them said. I nodded, though I wasn't sure how I felt yet. Then my phone rang again. And again. And again. 3 names lit up the screen, one after the other. Warren. Bryce. Blair. My children. For the first time in years, they were calling me without needing anything. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, another call came through. A different number. Calm voice. Professional. He was an attorney. "I've been following your situation," he said carefully. "I think you should protect yourself. Situations like this tend to change people's intentions." I knew exactly what he meant. When respect disappears, regret usually shows up too late, often holding paperwork. I thanked him and hung up. Outside the cafe, families passed by, hands linked, laughter spilling into the cold air. It was everything I'd wanted the night before. And suddenly, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. The first call wasn't an apology. It was a demand. And with that single sentence, I realized something terrifying. My children weren't sorry, they were scared. I answered the phone calmly, like I was taking a routine call from a stranger. "Dad," Warren said. His voice was tight. Controlled. "You need to take that video down. Now." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "It was a live stream," I replied. "There's nothing to take down." There was silence on the other end, followed by a sharp breath. "Do you have any idea what you've done? People are attacking me. My wife's family is furious. My job called me on Christmas morning." "I ate dinner," I said evenly. "Alone. You made us look horrible." "No," I corrected gently. "You did." The line went dead. An hour later, Bryce called. He didn't bother with greetings. "My clients are pulling out," he snapped. "I've lost deals already." "You turned a private family issue into a public execution." "Private?" I asked. "You laughed about me. In writing. That wasn't meant for you." "And yet," I said, "it was true." He demanded I post a correction. A story. Something to soften the narrative. To say it was a misunderstanding. "I won't lie anymore," I told him. He cursed and hung up. By mid-afternoon, my phone rang again. Blair. Her voice was small this time. Fragile. The voice she used when she wanted something. "Dad. I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It was a joke. I didn't mean it like that. People are destroying me online. I've already lost brand deals." I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. "You haven't called me dad like that in years," I said. "Not until now." She cried. Said she loved me. Said she was scared. I believed she was scared. I didn't believe she was sorry. When the calls stopped, the house felt quieter than it had on Christmas Eve, but the silence was different now. It wasn't empty. It was settled. That evening, I made another call. The attorney answered immediately. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's talk about my estate." We scheduled a meeting. Soon. For the first time in decades, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. That night, I slept peacefully. While my children scrambled to save reputations and incomes, I prepared to change something far more permanent. They thought the video was my revenge. They were wrong. What I signed next would last far longer than public outrage, and cost them far more than pride. 2 days after Christmas, I walked into a glass office building downtown, carrying a folder that felt heavier than it should have. Inside weren't just documents, there were decades of choices, compromises, and silences I'd finally decided to end. The attorney greeted me with a firm handshake. No pity. No judgment. Just professionalism. "You're doing the right thing," he said as we Saturday, not emotionally, legally. That mattered more than people realize. He laid everything out carefully. What I could change. What I couldn't. What would hold up if challenged. He didn't rush me, but he didn't sugarcoat anything either. I told him I wanted 3 changes. First, my will. My children would receive only what the law absolutely required. No extras. No favors. The remainder would go to organizations that supported elderly parents abandoned by their families. This isn't punishment, I said. It's alignment. He nodded and wrote it down. Second, trusts for my grandchildren. Independent. Locked. Protected. Their parents wouldn't be able to touch a single dollar. The money would be released only when the kids were old enough to stand on their own. They're innocent, I said. I won't make them collateral damage. The attorney paused, then said quietly, that's rare. And honorable. Third, the house. The house where my children grew up. The house where my wife and I danced barefoot in the kitchen. The house I'd kept far too long out of nostalgia. I told him to sell it. The proceeds would mostly go where the rest of the estate was going. Not to blood, but to purpose. He leaned back. You understand what this means? I do, I said. They stopped being entitled to my future when they laughed at my present. We scheduled the signing. As I stood to leave, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but answered. It was a producer from a lifestyle network. She'd seen the video. Millions had. They wanted to talk. About food. About storytelling. About turning pain into something meaningful. I didn't agree to anything right away. I just listened. When I left the building, the air felt lighter. Like something heavy had finally been set down. My children thought the worst was over. They were wrong. Because losing public sympathy was one thing. Losing inheritance, control, and access to the future, that was something else entirely. I thought signing those papers was the end of it. But karma hadn't even started yet. In the weeks that followed, my children would lose everything they thought defined them, one by one. January didn't waste any time. The fallout rolled in quietly at first, carried by casual conversations and concerned whispers. I never asked for updates, but in a city like ours, news travels fast, especially when it's fueled by public opinion. The first thing I heard was about Warren. A neighbor stopped me one morning as I was checking my mail. She lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. Did you hear? Your son lost his job. I nodded once. I had already suspected. Apparently, clients had complained. Loudly. The bank decided it didn't need the kind of attention Warren was bringing. His position vanished just like that, no ceremony, no second chances. Soon after, his marriage followed. Stress has a way of exposing cracks that were already there. I felt no satisfaction. Only distance. A few days later, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store. He mentioned Bryce. The flashy cars were gone. The deals dried up. People didn't want to work with someone whose integrity was now a question mark. Turns out, confidence doesn't mean much when trust disappears. Debt caught up quickly. Very quickly. Then there was Blair. That one reached me through a text from a friend's daughter who followed her online. She deleted everything, the message said. All her accounts. No sponsors. No manager. Nothing. Blair's entire world had been built on validation from strangers, and when the strangers turned away, there was nothing underneath to hold it up. One evening, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights blinking softly outside the window. I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. What I felt was stillness. Their lives were unraveling, but not because of me. Because the foundation they'd built was fragile to begin with. I had simply stepped out of the way. My phone buzzed. A message from the producer again. They wanted to move forward. A show. Cooking. Real conversations. Real stories. Purpose, knocking twice. While my children scrambled to rebuild identities they'd never truly examined, I was being offered something new, something earned. Still, the hardest part wasn't watching them fall. It was wondering whether they'd finally understand why. Just when I thought the story was ending in silence, something unexpected arrived. Not a call, not a demand. But 3 handwritten letters that changed everything I thought I knew about regret. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I touched them. 3 of them. Handwritten. My name written carefully on each. In a world of texts and rushed apologies, that alone felt different. I made tea, sat by the window, and opened the first letter. Warren's handwriting was uneven, like he'd stopped and started more than once. He wrote about losing his job. About the divorce. About learning, for the first time, how to make breakfast for his children and read them stories at night. He admitted he'd treated me like an obligation, like a resource instead of a person. "I'm not writing to ask for anything," he said. "I just needed you to know I finally see it." I set the letter down and let the steam from the mug fog my glasses. The second letter was Bryce's. Messier. Rushed. Honest in a way he'd never been. He admitted the life he'd shown the world was fake. That the money I gave him hadn't disappeared, it had been wasted. He was working a modest job now. Humbling work. Real work. "I forgot what you taught me," he wrote. "I'm sorry." The third letter was the lightest. Blair's. She wrote about shame. About chasing approval from people who never cared about her. About deleting her online life and working in a small bookstore where people spoke face to face instead of through screens. "I was embarrassed of you," she wrote. "And that truth makes me sick. I don't want forgiveness because you went viral. I want it because you're my father." I folded the letters neatly and stacked them together. I didn't cry. What I felt was something gentler. Understanding. Not absolution, but movement. They were growing. Too late for things to be the same. But maybe not too late for something better. I didn't respond right away. Some lessons need silence to settle. Weeks later, my phone rang. A familiar name, but a smaller voice. "Grandpa?" It was my grandson. He said he missed me. And in that moment, I knew where to begin again. I could have closed the door forever. Instead, I opened it just enough. But only on my terms. And what happened next completed the circle in a way I never imagined. 6 months after that Christmas Eve, I stood in a kitchen again, but this time, I wasn't alone. The room buzzed with quiet energy. Students gathered around a wide counter, watching my hands as I showed them how to season properly, how to trust their instincts instead of a recipe. Cameras rolled softly in the background. The cooking show had become real, food paired with stories, honesty served alongside technique. I never planned for a second act in life. But somehow, by choosing myself, I'd created one. After class, I met my grandchildren at a park near the water. They ran toward me without hesitation, arms wide, laughter spilling out of them like it always had. Children don't carry grudges, they carry truth. Their parents stayed at a distance. Respecting the boundary. That mattered. Later, I began seeing my children again, slowly. Neutral places. Short conversations. No pretending the past didn't happen. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant redefining the rules. "I have a life now," I told them once. "You're welcome in it. You're just not the center of it anymore." They understood. Or at least, they were learning to. At home that night, I cooked dinner with someone who'd become important to me. We moved around the kitchen easily, laughing, tasting, sharing space without expectation. Warmth returned, not because I chased it, but because I made room for it. Before bed, my phone buzzed. A short video from my grandson. A smile. A wave. Nothing dramatic. Everything meaningful. Looking back, I don't regret the live stream. Or the documents. Or the distance. I regret only waiting so long. Love doesn't require self-erasure. Family doesn't get to treat you as invisible just because you've always been there. If you're watching this and feel forgotten, hear me clearly. Your worth doesn't disappear when others stop noticing it. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're clarity. And choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Some stories end with reconciliation. Mine ended with wholeness. And that was enough.